I am not a smart and connected health PI, but I'm learning a lot here today. So I don't know, maybe I'll apply in the future. But when Wendy asked me to be a part of this special event and to share my lessons learned as a PI that specializes in NSF proposals, I thought, my gosh, what do I have to offer? So I thought about very hard what would be common attributes of responsive proposals. That's typically a question that PIs would ask me when I was at NSF. And it's very important to step back and think a little bit about, could we generalize some lessons? So you may have heard a few of those from the speakers before. Just to put it in context, and thank you for that introduction, I wrote lots of proposals, mainly NSF proposals, since I started as an assistant professor. And I really leveraged my atypical experience, having been duly trained in both AI through a PhD in computer science and computational biophysics in order to write compelling proposals. Some got funded, not all, some got funded. I'm not going to tell you my rate, my percentage, but I really specialized in NSF language. And then in 2019, I started a brief stint, about close to 3 years, in the Directorate for Computer Science and Information and Engineering in the Information Intelligence Systems Division, and specifically as a rotating program director in the III program, Information Integration and Informatics. And I'm very glad to see some of you today who I saw primarily for 2.5 years over Zoom. So I thought about common attributes of successful proposals. That's the thing that came first to my mind. And I said, oh, no, step back. You can never guarantee a successful proposal, right? So instead, this is going to be just a few major tips and some minor tips on responsive proposals. So let me start with the first one that you already heard in a form. Number one is set the stage. Typically, you'll get 4 panelists, so think of them as the 4 chairs there. I believe that's from The Voice or something, I don't know. So the first task that you have to do is really to get out of the box, right? Because as a PI, you get really excited about your technical novelty, right? The rigor of your ideas and the excitement. And when you think excitement, you're thinking maybe algorithms, mathematics, right? Formulation. So instead, what you have to do is to present a clear motivation and vision for your project. You really need to connect with your panelists. You need them to become champions of your proposal. And ideally, you should do that on page 1 of 15, right? If you delay that, it's not good. So the panelists really need to get excited about your proposal in the very first few pages. Your job in the rest of the proposal is not to lose them. And so then you can add all the sufficient technical details that support the motivation and vision that you hopefully set out in the very beginning. If you don't do that, it's very hard to garner their excitement, even if everything that you have technically is solid and beautiful and so elegant. In other words, do not lose them at hello. Step number 2, or tip number 2, really is to step back. Right? You're so devoted, you're so invested, you're thinking about objective 3.2 task C, right? And you want to have everything boxed, everything perfect. But it's very important to devote the time, or to make the time, so that you can step back and think at a broader level for the components, even those that you know exactly how they should be. You have it exactly in your mind what should be the approach and what should be the formulation. Have you considered alternative formulations? You might think there's no need. I have the best way. Quite possibly. But if you think about alternative formulation of your problem or your sub-problems, it may enrich your intellectual merit and broader impact. Have you considered alternative approaches? You might say, I don't need to. I have the best deep learning model, whatever it is. But maybe if you consider alternative approaches, it may enrich your intellectual merit and broader impact. And the reason that it's important to step back is twofold. Even in the Smart and Connected Health program, you are expected to contribute to at least 2 science areas outside of biomedical fields. And maybe thinking about alternative formulations or alternative approaches may really give you that expansion that you need. Your panelists are diverse. Innately, they come with alternative formulations and approaches. So if you don't raise them, they will. Major tip number 3, control the narrative. It's all about the narrative. So in other words, put words in their mouths. right? You're not writing the proposal for you, which really sucks, right? That's what you want to do. You want to write it for you, but you're writing it for the panelists. And you have to keep in mind the potential panel dynamics when you write the proposal, right? We know life, you do life. Imagine that poor panelist, 2 a.m., baby has been screaming, they have to teach a class, PD is on their back saying, your review is late. And like, I got 1 hour on this, 1 hour on reading your proposal. Now you may say, well, that's not fair. They should put like 5 hours. I put 10 hours. Well, that's you. You're a wonderful human being. But the panelists come in various forms and shapes. What can they get in those hours? Right? You have to make it easy for them. Can you help them tell your story the way you want it to be told? Now, why do I say this? I say this because there's a bad scenario that happens during panel discussions. Many of you have been panelists. So imagine this in your head. Either another panelist or the PD is asking, so what was the contribution of this section? And a panelist that perhaps was even your champion is saying, let me try to find that out. Background noise, flipping, 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 or in the Zoom world, scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. That dead silence is not good. They need to have an answer. So you need to have the panelists paraphrase the contributions, not overall just for intellectual merit, broader impact, but ideally for each section, ideally for every paragraph. Why did you put it there? So think carefully about what you write and how it supports the overall proposal. Now, of course, you know there are only 15 pages. So you're thinking, what are you telling me? I have to do so many things. Yeah, life's tough. But don't write that proposal the week before it's due. I've done it. So this is a lesson for me too, right? You need to work on your grantsmanship. You need to become a writer, always a better writer. Do not underestimate that. That is a huge, huge part of being able to connect with your panel. There are some tips. So here's a quick tip. I didn't know this when I was a junior PI, but apparently you can use the facilities, equipment, and resources document, read the PAPG, do read the PAPG. Don't think that is just for your Office of Sponsored Programs. You should go and read the PAPG. It's illuminating. Read it over the weekend with a glass of wine. This one specifically, facilities, equipment, and other resources, it gives you the space to describe certain collaborations. That maybe you don't have space to do that in the 15 pages, and certainly you're not allowed to do that in the letters of collaboration for NSF. Those are very template right? They're not like NIH. But if you go in the PAPG, unfunded collaboration, I just put it here because people didn't used to believe me. They thought I was giving them the wrong information. So you're in the PAPG, unfunded collaborations, any substantial collaboration with individuals, blah, blah, so unfunded collaborators. You can describe that in this, facilities, equipment, and other resources. So you can write there what the collaboration is about, what the collaborators are bringing, expertise, data, technologies. You have the space to do that. And here's some laundry list, other things that I thought about. So by no means they are exhaustive. So first, I just wanted to say, do not think that if you follow all of these, you're going to be able to write a perfect proposal. There are no perfect proposals, but some are better than others. So for instance, it's always best, this is the best, if you can find a problem that nobody or very few people worked on. Now, of course, the cynics among you might be saying there are no new problems under the sun. Perhaps. But in lieu of that, can you bring a new formulation to a well-established problem? Perhaps you have a different take on it, a different angle, a different perspective. It's always nice to have a running example that you can use to illustrate the importance, to justify all your thrusts, and to enrich your intellectual merit. Now, we often see that we can use sometimes different examples for the different thrusts, but there's a threat in that. Panelists might perceive your thrusts being disconnected from one another. They don't see the cohesion. They don't see that whole logic, that whole narrative. Always cast your preliminary work as exciting, including your recent publications, but do make sure to distinguish it from the proposed work. You do not want to run the risk of your proposal being seen as incremental work. Evaluation. You need to have it. And really, here is where you need to think it through, probably devote quite a bit of time on it. Metrics, always good to have, always detailed. You need them to fend off easy criticism, such as, well, interesting proposal, but I don't quite see the impact. How will it be measured, evaluated? I didn't quite see metrics. Broader impacts, you run the risk, and I used to do this too, that I wanted to do more and more and more. High schools and middle schoolers and undergraduates and graduates and postdocs and my neighborhood and my grandma. But the problem is that more can be less. Stick with what you can do best and hammer away at it. It's really not about the number of activities, it's about the impact of activities. So always ask the question, why am I going to do this activity? How many am I going to reach? What is going to be the impact? And final, in the broader impact, you don't have to be creative. You don't have to think about going to the moon and giving lectures, but you do have to be impactful. It's all about the impact there, however you achieve it. And in that very remote possibility that your proposal does not get picked up for funding, do detach from the feedback a little bit. It's about the proposal and not you. You are an amazing human being. Always growing though. So value that feedback. Perhaps at least it used to be healthy for me to value the feedback and to treat it as a teachable moment. What could I learn from this for the next time? There always is the next time, right? And then go and garner more feedback, seek more feedback. Talk to the Cognizant PD. She can be reached at wnielsen@nsf.gov. Thank you.